Hey guys, it is Ryan Palmisano, and this is my kinesiological analysis. So for my skill, I've chosen a face-off in lacrosse, specifically SNG, meaning standing neutral grip. So the purpose of this movement, the game begins, and every time there is a goal scored, the ball is placed on the turf, and two players will battle to enclose the ball between the top and bottom sidewall of the head, to then pinch the ball between these two sidewalls and to pop it to themselves to get possession of that ball. To do this, you want maximum speed, accuracy, and technique. So the classification of this skill would be represent that of giving motion, specifically giving motion to an external object. So this movement is going to involve pushing and pulling. It's going to involve lifting as well as punching, which we will get to later. So let's break down the skill into phases here. The first phase is a preloading phase. This is a static position. Because this skill is reacting to an external whistle, the player cannot be moving at all. Once the ball has been placed, positions have been set, and you cannot move before that whistle has been blown. That's why this skill begins with a static preloading phase. This is indicated through the body being in a static position. The ankles, knees, hips, and spine, and shoulder and elbows are all in flexion, and 80% of the player's body weight is rested upon that front right leg. So phase 2, this will be a propulsion phase. The joints and muscles involved aggressively react to the whistle and punch into the ball, which is that you're seeing in this picture here. The body has shifted all weight onto that forward leg, okay? The shoulder has been pressed into deeper flexion. The left shoulder is into a slight extension. The right elbow progressed into extension, obviously, as the punch occurs, getting that stick to the ball. And then the right ankle, knee, and hips are progressed into a deeper state of flexion as well. And then that left knee, or that back leg, is beginning to extend as we're pushing body weight off to the ball. So phase 3, this is an execution phase. This is a dynamic phase in which muscles and joints incorporated in phase 2 aggressively pull to the left hip. This picture is a little fuzzy, but as you can see, that ball is pinched between the side walls and that head, okay? And that's why it is a dynamic movement, because the phase is executed by pulling the ball out of the scrum and getting it to your left hip and popping it out. So to indicate this phase, the body weight has shifted from the right leg to the left. The right shoulder has come into horizontal adduction as we're moving that stick to the left hip. The left shoulder has come into extension. The right wrist is now into a pronated state. The hips go into a slight amount of flexion still. And then the ankles are going to decrease the dorsiflexion angle as you're moving from right hip to left. So, anatomically speaking, phase 1, the primary joints are going to be the hips, the wrist, and the shoulder. Now the movers are going to be the iliopsoas for hip flexion, the biceps brachii for elbow flexion, and the anterior deltoid for flexion of the shoulder. So phase 2, primary joints are going to be to the hips, wrist, and shoulder still. As you can see from the picture though, there is the change that we spoke about before in phase 2. So all the primary movers engage in a concentric contraction. The muscles are concentrically contracting to punch into that ball and to aggressively push that weight onto the side towards the ball. So the main movers are going to be the gluteus maximus for extension, obviously pushing off that left leg and propelling body mass over the ball to get that pinch. You're going to have the brachioradialis for supination, because we're supinating, okay? Supinating that hand to get that thumb over the ball, and the anterior deltoid for shoulder flexion as we are punching that shoulder and punching that hand into the ball. So phase 3, primary joints are going to be the hips, the shoulder, and the thoracolumbar junction. So the primary movers of this movement is going to be the gluteus maximus. This is going to be extension for both legs, as both legs are coming out of a state of flexion and are going to go into a state of extension as we have successfully trapped the ball and we're moving it from the right placement on the turf to the hip to pop it out. The shoulder We're using the pectoralis major for horizontal adduction, and then the external obliques for thoracic rotation, as we are rotating to keep that ball away from the opponent and bring it to the hip and pop that ball out for position. So for mechanical analysis, forces acting are going to be friction, force acting upon the head as the stick is gliding across the turf to trap that ball is going to be a state of friction, and balance. Because the first phase is static, the body will resist external forces to maintain equilibrium in that state, so we're not going earlier, the body's not shifting and causing a penalty to be called. As for mechanical principles, balance, so the first phase of the movement is a static phase, which stability is crucial. And then balance again for its second meaning, because the first phase is a static position, which attaining mobility to be in the most optimal position is integral. If you're in a funky position, you're not going to have the most optimal, effective, and efficient movement, to get to that ball quickest. Mechanical analysis for phase 2. Again, friction is still here as we are punching, and that phase 2 we're encapsulating the ball. So again, friction is still a force acting upon that stick as it's closing in on that ball. And then momentum, the mass of the body and velocity at which it's propelled, because we're propelling off that back leg onto the right to get to that ball. As for mechanical principles, we're going to be using locomotion will be in effect, because we're using the most efficient stick path from phase 1 to phase 2 without any wasted motion between phase 1 and getting that head to the ball in phase 2. Manipulation, the forces of the acting musculature manipulate the stick to produce the desired pattern. Obviously, with the muscles we're engaging in for the prime movers, we're doing forcing a pattern of that stick to be most efficient to get to that ball at the quickest rate. For phase 3, again, friction is pretty much going to be used throughout this entire movement, obviously, as that stick is either constantly gliding to get to the ball, or it's gliding away from the ball to pull it to that left hip. So again, it's still dragging against that turf to get to the exit. And then the opponent's resistant. At this point, possession has been won, but the opponent is still going to be applying force to dislodge that ball to the person who has finally pinched that ball and got possession. As for mechanical principles, balance. At this point, possession has already been won in the body's regaining stability as body mass shifts from one leg to the other. And again, locomotion. This is due to the body traveling from right hip to left with the ball safely enclosed within the head and pinched between those side walls. For a deeper video on this movement itself, there's a video link right here. Greg Grenland is a professional face-off athlete for professional lacrosse, or he just recently retired and started a very large face-off academy, which is a program for elite face-off athletes in lacrosse.